Well, thank you, and good morning to everybody. And I'd like to thank IRMA for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. As mentioned, I've been in the security business about over 40 years, 17 of which security director for Carson Peary Scott. And for the past 15 years, I've been an independent security consultant for law enforcement, security firms, manufacturers of retail products, and I've conducted threat assessments for hospitals, hotels, restaurants, retailers, banks, and so forth. Today, I'll be discussing improving customer relations during the pandemic. Um, During yesterday's presentation and today's, some of the terms I kept hearing was customer retention, customer loyalty, trust, all these essentials to running a business. But one term that really wasn't mentioned until today was employee retention, and that is extremely important. First, it will affect your sales. It will affect your image. Keep in mind that these employees go home and they share their experiences, good, bad, or indifferent. They share with their family and friends, and those family and friends also share with other people, word of mouth. So we have to really place a lot more emphasis on that employee. It can be a very major asset to running your business successfully. Let me give you an example, kind of set the mood for today. Yesterday, I was shopping at a national grocer, and as I was exiting the store, I saw a customer who was right about the exit door, but he was coming in apparently, or it looked like, and he looked a little bit stunned. And walking away from him was an employee, and she had her name badge on, so I knew that was an employee. And he yelled at her, or in a loud voice, "Why are you yelling at me?" She replied, "I'm not. Get out of here." This was from an employee. Now, I don't believe the retailer had any notion that this had gone on, but it leaves a lot of questions. Number one, will that employee return, or excuse me, will that customer return to the store? How many people will that customer share that experience with? Was that employee just having a bad day? Did she even realize what her tone was and how she sounded? How many customers will be treated the same way by that employee? Does she have the same attitude with other employees? And let's talk about the other victim, the retailer. All the effort they spent to keep the business afloat, to get customers in, all that effort, and this is the result. Keep in mind that employee, in my term, and the way I look at it, is the weakest link. You can control to a degree your utilities, you can control your displays, you can control again your out of stock, your merchandise, and the merchandising itself. But that employee is your weakest link. It's very unstable. We have to really apply a lot of attention to that employee in the training and so forth, and I'll get into that. Today's discussion, I'll cover both issues that pertain both to employees and also customers. Let me set the stage up a little bit more. Today's environment, the mask requirements, social media platforms, high unemployment, politics, lockdowns, have all added to a potentially harsh environment and is sometimes even combative. Businesses need to establish a strategy to help employees respond to potentially confrontational situations. Today, I'll be talking about training, signage, social media postings, and also proper documentation. The challenge we have is this harsh environment is also fueled by media. Media has seemed to normalize confrontations. Outlets, news outlets, Facebook, Twitter, are all inundated with examples of customer confrontations. They've even named it Karen. Customers seem to be looking for confrontations. This environment has also increased the number of scams and fraud. Customers are also having less tolerance, higher demands. They don't want restrictions, no waiting in line. Customer is always right, even if they're not. In short, we have a perfect storm. You have higher stress levels and shorter fuse. So what can possibly go wrong? Safety and security are a major issue, okay? Uh, Both the employee and also the customer, they're looking for a safe environment. We also have to consider delivery drivers. For those of you who have your own in-house drivers, you're expanding services in the stores. That has to be considered. Parking lot safety and security. Again, any of these issues that lack will affect your customer service, customer loyalty, customer retention. And again, as we mentioned, those are all important. Our training has to include now more of the employees. The training has to include a different level of sensitivity uh, because of, again, what the customers are facing and also what the employees are facing. The employees, when you look at it, they're facing possible unemployment. They're facing personal issues. Again, their stress levels are high. They come into the store. That is also brought out to everybody else. The customers see it. The employees see it. The training also has to include an area of customer de-escalation, confrontation de-escalation. Also, role play should be included. When you look at, if you do have any issues of confrontation, role play those issues in the training system. Critique them. How could we improve that? What could have been done to avoid that issue? Really look at all your confrontations you've had. Even how do you say no to a customer? That has to be looked at. Customers take all that for granted or take it all in account. And again, you want that customer to come back. You want a friendly environment for that customer. And when these customers come to your store, they have to have a positive experience. The no factor could be a deal maker. So employees have to understand how to say no to that. And that comes out in role play. So role play is a major issue, and that should be done even on a regular basis. New employees, existing employees, look at all those confrontations, look at all those incidents, just like safety issues. If a person has a slip and fall, you'd like to review that with all your employees. Same thing with a confrontation or a negative to a customer. Review that with your employees. Acknowledge employees who have successfully de-escalated any confrontation. Again, employees need support. They have to know they're doing the right thing. And when an employee goes out of their way to de-escalate a situation, that person should be acknowledged. Manager's role. Too often, employees wait too long before contacting management when there's an issue. Employees have to be empowered to contact management, also understanding that management will support them and help. Again, the idea is to de-escalate the customer or the confrontation so that the customer comes back into the store. So support that employee. Communication. Proper signage is important. The signage has to be in plain sight, detailing company policy on mask requirements, social distancing, returns without a receipt. So make sure, review those signage, make sure it's clear, make sure it's in obvious locations so everybody reads it, and avoid the miscommunication. Body language. Too often than not, this is an area which is really omitted in training and also not observed by management or anybody else except for, again, the customer. Employee has to understand that words are important, but body movement is also added to that. That's part of the communication factor. Eye contact, hand gestures, the body, how it's positioned. Everything has to be looked at because the customer is looking at that. Too often, again, when you walk into a store, it doesn't take much to size up an employee to see whether or not you're going to have a good or a bad experience with that employee. You have an idea just by looking at the employee on how they move. Same thing with the customer. They have the same experience. They have the same talent to be able to do that. So make sure you look at those employees and take and observe the employees, critique the employees. This may be a good place also to consider. Again, we used to have this years ago, mystery shoppers. They used to come in a store and just observe, go through the process. This may be a good time to re-engage in that. either hire a service, or you can get a relative or a friend to come in as a shopper. And again, critique those employees. Was their experience positive? What was negative about it? Were they serviced properly? What kind of attitude did the employee have? Did the employee smile? Was the employee, uh, how often did the employee say thank you and welcome? These are things that really have to be looked at. Too often we train the employees, and as Bob mentioned, there's a check mark. We train the employees, we check up the box, and we put them on the floor. Little to no follow-up. And that's important. If you go back to the example, my experience that I had yesterday at the grocer, I don't think that retailer had any idea of that attitude that employee had. But based on the attitude, I don't think it was the first time that person has displayed that kind of attitude, either toward a customer or toward an employee. She was just too familiar, or it became too natural the way she walked away from the customer and obviously said no and get out of here. You just don't say that. But again, she was too comfortable in her delivery on that. So look at those employees. Everything you do, whether to keep your business going, to keep the stock on the shelves, and to keep everything going, the utilities and so forth, all that is a moot point if your employee doesn't service the customer properly. That customer is not going to come back, and most of all, again, that person, because of word of mouth, will spread the word. Again, when we talked about verbal communication, be consistent, okay? This is an important piece. You have to be consistent on how you deliver your messages to your customers, especially when it comes to negative messages. These negative messages ought to be actually pre-script, so everybody delivers the same message. People will take that in different ways. So again, what is perceived by the customer or what is actually said by the employee, that could different. What counts is perception here. So pre-script your information, especially the negative. Train your employees, role play with your employees, and how to deliver that negative information. That is crucial. Also, it'll help in developing your defense should that be challenged. Should your actions be challenged, at least you have, this is what was actually said to the customer. So again, train your employees, but also follow up, do checks, do critiquing, get an outside service, get a friend to do it. Tone of voice is important. And again, too often we don't understand, we're not cognizant on, again, is our voice level too high, too low? So it's going back to that example, the experience. Again, that tone was extremely negative, and that, in this case, the customer just left without any type of incident. However, that could have went the wrong way quite easily. Could have been combative. It could have been all kind of situations that occurred as a result, negative situation that occurred after that. So be careful on that. Again, I mentioned about mystery shopper. Really consider that because again, you as a manager, you can't be every place at every time. So bring somebody in to help you critique your employees. Even just get an outside opinion, fresh eyes on a situation. When you look at confrontations, you have to consider that every customer coming in that store now has a cell phone. These cell phones are equipped with cameras. Whatever is done, any confrontation, you can expect that confrontation is going to be recorded. It's going to be recorded, and you can anticipate that both verbal and body language are going to be important. What you see in the video, what is said, the actions, body language, it's all critiqued, and it's all will be taken out of context against you. So again, keep in mind that everything you do, everything you say, actions, everything is being recorded and documented. The other part is keep in mind that all this is subject to be posted on social media. Social media is full with clips like this. This will give you a really bad reputation, and is just completely takes on the whole process. Everything you worked for to keep your business afloat can be affected by this. We've had situations that when I was at Carson's, quite a number of them, where again, we had one situation in one of the stores that happened to be a false alarm, but somebody threw a garbage can lid down the aisle, and somebody said it was a gunshot. It wasn't that, but it was, again, you know, that's what went out, word of mouth. And we spent over $1 million in marketing to get customers back in the store. Again, once a customer leaves your store, it's hard for them to come back. Competition is fierce. So understand that you want that customer in, you do work, you do a lot of work. There's a lot of investment on your part to get that customer in your store. The last thing you want to do is scare them away. At all times, you are on stage and the camera is rolling. So, you know, smile. Documentation. Documentation is important on any situation. When you have a confrontation, secure all your video if you don't have any of your own video. If you have cameras in your stores, record that video, keep that video aside. Also, have a policy that an employee will be there witnessing and also taking notes of the incident. You want all that documentation on your behalf. It'll help two ways. Number one, it'll help reduce legal fees and hopefully avoid lawsuits entirely. Make sure it's all well documented and you retain that information. If you don't have cameras, you may want to consider putting cameras, especially in areas like your front end and so forth, that'll record those kind of confrontations. This is a good time you're planning your defense, making sure that everything is covered. Good example, when I first started Carson's way back, we first did is I redid all the training manuals for the company on security. The first thing after doing that, I hired an outside attorney who specialized in filing lawsuits against retailers. So I hired the attorney to look at my training manual and again critique it. Basically, I told the attorney, okay, you've been hired by a customer who wants to sue us now for our actions. Here's our training manual, which would be the first thing you would subpoena, and take me to court. So they went through the manual, came back, we made the adjustments onto the manual. It cost us a pretty good investment. It was a pretty penny that it cost us. But after that, about 3 months later, I received a call from this attorney who basically told me that a customer had come to him and tried to retain his services to sue us. And his reply was, first of all, I can't do that because he was the attorney who reviewed our manual. Secondly, it's because he knows the content of our manual, and there was no he was going to take that case. And if he did, he'd have to ask for a pretty massive retainer. Well, the customer had told him that he had been to 4 other attorneys, and they all told him the same thing. Again, I planned for defense. I looked at my training manual, and I had an outsider review it. We become store blind quite often if we do our own development and so forth. You have to get an outside view on things like that. Also for customer service and so forth, like I said, get an outside critique. Technology. I know I'm going pretty fast here, but anyway, on technology, the most common technology out there that you'll look at is cameras and panic alerts and wearable alerts as well that are available today now. Some of the new technology out there is obviously AI. AI has come to us in many forms. AI can determine slips and falls, even with your existing camera systems. It could improve driver safety if you have your own drivers. Again, everybody's safety is really paramount here. Customer shopping analysts, it can identify people who take merchandise or take an item, let's say out of the freezer and put it back. Okay, it can identify that customer. It could also alert maybe a local salesperson to come and see maybe they can help that customer out. But obviously the customer thought they wanted the item, but they put it back. Is there assistance you can provide to that customer? Again, analytics will help identify that person. People loitering in certain aisles, again, that's informed customer service. Let's get somebody out in the aisle and see how we can help that customer. Merchandise tracking, whether it be your back room, your front shelf, and so forth, it can actually track that merchandise throughout your store. And also, AI is available for customized solutions. So anything that you can identify with your eyes that's repetitive can be identified through AI. Basically, all the indicators show that the situation we're in today with this pandemic, that's going to continue for a long time. These programs are really long-term. It's not going to go away in a year. It's not going to go away, anytime soon. In fact, my projection is going to get worse before it gets better. Competition is fierce out there. And again, you want to retain that employee. You want to retain the customer. And the last thing you want is all that work and getting that customer in the door to be, again, have a negative experience where that customer doesn't come back in the store. So consider some of these issues I mentioned today, training the employee, becoming more sensitive in the training, understanding that the employee has stress of their own. They may have a bad day. Bring that up during the training and let the employee know that you're sensitive to that. Let the employee know that you are there to back them. But on the other side is make sure that employee understands what your expectations are. Make sure the employee understands that, yes, they'll be being monitored. Role play. Make sure you go through the role play. To tell an employee or to train an employee and check the checkbox isn't enough. You really have to go through explanations. You have to go through examples so that employee has and walks away with a good understanding how to say no, how to de-escalate, how to help the image to the company. Employee retention. Again, make sure that we understand that employee plays a crucial role in your reputation. That employee is going to go away. It's terminated from the company or quits on their own. Their perception of what you are, how they're being treated, will be forwarded to all, and share with all their friends and family, who will in turn share with other friends and family. So understand that employee is valuable to you. So take that into account. And again, safety and security, although it really wasn't part of this, but again, that has to do with customer service and also customer safety. Make sure that you do have a safe environment. Make sure your delivery drivers are protected and so forth, and your parking lot as well. So with that, I want to just say, I like to say thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm here to address any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Your advice to our retailers on how they can improve their customer relation strategy is certainly valuable and timely. Excuse me. We did receive a few questions from the audience for you, so let's get started. About customer sensitivity, we already have a lot of these retailers have customer service training. So what is the difference?
The training is great, but it doesn't really dive down to the sensitivity. An employee really has to understand that, number one is we have to understand as employers that, one, we understand the environment that the employee is dealing with. They're our front line. They have to know that, yes, we have their back, that we know they're going to have bad days, good days, but also we have to understand the customer. We have to convey that to the employee. Customers are going to come in. They're going to have high stress levels. They're going to have short fuses. That employee has to understand that and realize that that customer may be having a really bad day. We don't know what kind of day they're having. So the employee has to be trained to deal with that. And if they can't, or if they reach their limit, they have to know how to contact the manager. We all have different abilities, and that employee has to really be trained to understand that and be more sensitive to the customer. And we have to be more sensitive to both employee and also the customer.
So in that aspect, and our previous speaker talked about role play, would that be something to take into consideration in these sensitivity trainings?
Role play is a must. The check a box is never enough, especially today. We can't assume that an employee knows even how to say no to a customer. That is crucial. I've been in stores where I've had a very negative experience, even just bringing in a return. There was one time I went to a national home improvement center, and it was just going to be a simple return. I had my receipt. I go to the return desk, and there's a lady there who's just cleaning off her register, and no eye contact at all. And I try to step up to the register, and right away, without even saying anything other than, "Sorry, get back." Her tone of voice. I was okay. I'm sorry. I stepped over the line. I didn't know it was that crucial to stand on the line while you clean your desk. But again, we have to understand that, and the role play is important. Incidents like that, especially if a video system in your store, record that or look at that video, play it back for the employee, play it back for all your employees, critique it, not to diminish her or as a punishment, but also to help everybody grow so they all understand. Because I don't think they really understand how they're perceived. Perception is reality to the customer, and whatever the customer feels, that's what they're going. That's how they're going to go home with. Whatever we think we did or how we said it doesn't matter. Is the idea, the feeling that customer has when they come in and when they go out. One of the things we did at Carson's, especially downtown, we had guards throughout the store. But because I understood that guard was going to be the first thing and the last thing the customer saw when they came into our building, I made sure I personally vetted every officer that was on the door, the way they looked, the way they act, the way they smiled. Everything about them was scrutinized on a regular basis because I knew that person was going to be the first and the last person that customer saw. So the image of our company rested on that officer. So I have to understand also now as a store owner, as a retail, as a leader, I have to understand that employee plays a major role on how that customer is going to perceive us.
We have time for about 2 questions, and here's one that is talking about what's happening right now. As you know, most retailers struggle with individuals or consumers who refuse to wear a mask in the stores, while local municipalities and state governments are requiring them to wear a mask. Are there any favorite tips or methods that you would suggest for these retailers in dealing with an individual in that circumstance?
Yes, right off the bat, as soon as a customer starts refusing, management has to be called. Again, keep in mind, you have an hourly employee who's delivering a very negative message to a customer. It's not going to go right. Get a member of management to do that. Okay, again, for typical day-to-day without an issue, no problem. But as soon as that customer starts challenging, that employee has to be empowered to get a hold of a manager, get the manager engaged in a situation. Smile. You know, again, your attitude, the way you look, the way you present yourself, body language, that's really important. Eye rolls. I can tell you right now, you know, the last thing I need is an employee to roll their eyes as I'm trying to, you know, get my message across. That right there is a deal breaker. So again, everything is scrutinized by that customer. So anything will be taken out of context. So the other piece is make sure your message is consistent, pre-scripted. You want to make sure that if you confront a customer and you say one thing, the next one you're going to do exactly the same.
Right. I can understand the smiling. When I was younger, someone once told me that, Alex, all you got working for is your personality and your smile. Hang on to that. So we try our best. What would you say is the biggest reason for customer outbreaks? We know we got a lot of things going on in the world right now, so it could be a ton of them, but what would, in your opinion, is the biggest reason?
Well, I think right now is stress. Stress being brought on by again, the COVID issue, high unemployment, just the culture that exists outside of the store. Let alone you come in the store and all of a sudden you're faced with restrictions. You're faced with rules that you don't, as far as you're concerned, are going to inconvenience you. I was at another grocery about a month ago, and I'm waiting in line there to check my groceries. And there's a person in the line next to me, and he approached the cashier and right away he started complaining. He said, why was your aisle blocked? I saw your people, they had a cart there and they were stocking the shelves. And that seemed to be blocking partial the aisle there. And he was complaining about it. And he was sincere. What the employee didn't do is contact the manager. And that manager should have been called and dealt with that employee or that customer at that time. The customer was not satisfied with the response he was getting from the cashier. And she wasn't trained enough to contact management. So he may have left without further confrontation, but how did he leave? What was his attitude? What was his impression of the store? All he was complaining about was the aisle was partially blocked. It shouldn't have been. His comments were, or suggestions, you ought to stock your shelf at night. This is an inconvenience to the customer. I'm here. I don't want to go around these carts. I understand that you got to do what you got to do during the time you have to do it. But again, it shouldn't have been left to the cashier, to an hourly cashier who's paid minimum wage, probably part-time, to deal with a customer at that level.
Right. Tony, I want to thank you so much for your time today and your insights. We really appreciate it. We know retailers and consumers, given what's going on in today's world, are both need a little bit of sensitivity. And as a previous speaker mentioned, our retailers provide hope to the community, and as you mentioned, that could be projected through body language and how you deal with the consumer. So we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Your time today.
Thank you.